Hello and welcome to the IHRSA webinar, Coronavirus Conversations, Legal FAQs, and Staffing Operations. First, we have a quick disclaimer. While the information in this webinar is believed to be current, employment laws and regulations are constantly changing. It is intended for the general education of industry personnel, not as legal advice. Individuals needing legal advice should consult an attorney who is competent in this area of the law. It is now my pleasure to introduce your speakers for today. Adam Sloustcher is an associate in Fisher & Phillips in San Diego, California. He represents local, regional, and national employers in a broad range of employment disputes. He has experience litigating matters in state and federal courts, state administrative tribunals, and in arbitration. Sloustcher provides day-to-day preventative advice regarding hiring, discipline, and termination practices, leaves of absences, the interactive process and reasonable accommodations, and preparation of employment handbook and personnel policies. Aaron Moore is the Director of Operations for VIDA Fitness in Washington, D.C. He has developed the upscale fitness provider from its first location in 2006 to 6 locations today. Moore handles all business operations and oversight for VIDA. Adam, if you're ready, the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much. And I hope that everyone tuning in today is well and safe. I've been asked to talk about some of the hottest questions I'm receiving right now from clients in the industry. And we're going to start with club closures. We're going to talk and then talk about the new federal sick leave law that's applicable to employers of less than 500 employees. I only have about 20 minutes, and a lot of these topics we can talk about for hours. So I'm going to give you as much detail in as little time as possible. So of course, follow up with questions anytime after the webinar is over. So a lot of our clients here in California and even nationwide, their clubs are closing due to government shutdown orders. And so I've been helping clients navigate what issues they need to think about when these clubs are closing. So these are really the top questions that come up is, what is a furlough? What is a temporary closure? What is a layoff? And so what's the difference and what do I need to think about when deciding which option to go with? Well, generally, I separate these into 2 categories. So a furlough is the same to me as a temporary closure or temporary layoff. And all that means is that we are reducing the hours of our employees. A layoff to me is a permanent layoff or a termination of employment, which essentially means exactly as it sounds. We're terminating the employee. So if we're going to go with the furlough or temporary closure option, some considerations are, check in your local jurisdiction as to whether that constitutes a terminating event. In California, if, for example, if you furlough employees and it exceeds 10 business days, that could constitute a terminating event, which would trigger us as the employer to pay out final wages and accrued vacation. Of course, if you're going to go with the layoff option, which means you're permanently terminating employees, again, check in your local jurisdiction, but that might trigger final wages and vacation pay, accrued vacation pay to be paid out as well. Do I have to pay my employees while they are temporarily furloughed or temporarily laid off? General rule is that if the employees are not performing work, then you don't have to pay them. Of course, there are some employees who will be home during temporary closures that will be performing work. So if they are, then the simple answer is we need to know how much time they are working if they're a non-exempt employee and pay them for that time. Other assistance I can offer to my employees. So a lot of clubs and employers around the country are are a little bit scared of the new federal sick leave law, which we're going to talk about in a second. And they don't want to have to be responsible for paying the extra sick leave time that law gives to employees. So a lot of employers are engaging in massive layoffs right now. Others are considering alternatives to layoffs. And so there are about 26 or 27 different states in the United States that offer what's called work sharing programs, which are alternatives to layoffs. So if you can get past the cash flow issue that's presented by the new federal sick leave law and hang in there, then one option in lieu of a layoff would be these work sharing programs. So if you have more questions about that, we can talk after the webinar. But again, there's 27 states out there that offer that type of program. The last thing to think about here, if you're closing down your club, is what notice am I giving to my employees? No matter what, we should obviously be communicating with our employees as to our closure. But just be aware that there's a federal statute and then similar state statutes out there that require, that have very strict requirements about what needs to go in that notice. And if we don't do the notice the right way and we don't send it to the right people or the right government agencies, we could be liable down the road or subject to claims down the road. So before closing or before taking the option of furlough, temporary closure, or permanent layoff, definitely check with your legal counsel to see if you're subject to any of these notice statutes. Okay, this is the part where I'm not going to be able to cover all of these slides in the next 15 minutes, but I'm going to try to give you the rundown of what you need to know. The Families First Coronavirus Response Act, so the FFCRA, becomes effective April 1. Before yesterday, everyone thought it becomes effective April 2, but the Department of Labor issued some guidance, and they say in that guidance that we now are subject to this new law April 1. So what does the FFCRA do? It provides emergency paid sick leave to employees on top of the state sick leave that your employees are already entitled to. It also expands job protected leave for employees in certain situations. And then it gives employers a chance to get the money that is to be paid under this statute back through tax credits. So let's quickly talk about the emergency paid sick leave portion of the bill of the law first. Are you subject to it? So the first part of the analysis is, do I have less than 500 employees? This is a complex question if you are an employer that has multiple gyms across multiple locations and can be considered to be one employer versus many different employers. Okay, so there's two real legal theories that are involved here. They're called the integrated enterprise theory and a joint employment theory. Definitely something you need to check in with your legal counsel about to determine whether you're subject to this law. Most employers will be. If you have more than 500 employees or 500 or more employees, you won't be. So it's definitely worth checking in with counsel to determine if it applies to you. There's no minimum eligibility requirement. So really any employee who works for you is eligible for this. And what they're entitled to is 80 hours of paid sick leave for full-time employees. And then you can see that the part-timers are also entitled to paid sick leave as well. In order for that employees to qualify, they need to not be able to work or telework for the following 6 reasons. I'm not going to go through each 6 right now. You're going to get these materials after the webinar. But just of note, the first reason is the employee is not able to work due to a federal, state, or local quarantine or isolation order. So that one will be triggered quite a bit. at what rates do I need to pay the sick leave if there's an employee eligible? There's different rates that apply for the different qualifying reasons, and so make sure to pay attention to that. And then just know that there's a cap to the amount that the employees can receive. Again, there's different caps for the different qualifying reasons as stated on this slide. The statute does say that there could be an exemption and that the Secretary of Labor can issue regulations creating an exemption, particularly applicable to small businesses with fewer than 50 employees. As of right now, we don't have information from the Secretary of Labor about this exemption. Okay, so we're hoping it's coming, but as of right now, we don't know how to apply for the exemption, etc. So stay tuned for information on that. Please note that there are notice requirements for employers. So the Secretary of Labor, actually about an hour before this presentation began, finally issued the poster that must be displayed publicly at your work site. If you don't have it, you can probably Google it or find it on the internet or email me after and I'll email it to you. Tax credits. I did mention that employers who are subject to this law that pay out the sick leave can receive the money back through tax credits. So if you can withstand the cash flow issues presented by this new law, just know that you will see the money coming back to you. And I'm told, at least through guidance from the Department of Labor, that it should be quicker than we first expected. So the second part of the bill is the emergency family and medical leave. And what does this do? It provides job protected leave for those who need to take care of their children, essentially. So again, does it apply to you? You need to think about this carefully. Are we an integrated employer or joint employer? That analysis is necessary to determine whether we are less than 500 employees. If we are, this law applies to us. Just note that employees are not entitled to this job protected leave if they have not worked for you for longer than 30 days. And so here's the qualifying reason to receive this type of job protected leave. It's the employee needs leave to care for their son or daughter who's not able to go to school, essentially. Okay, so it's not as many qualifying reasons for this job protected leave as there are for the paid sick leave. So the first 10 days of this job protected leave may be unpaid, but just know that the employee can elect to substitute accrued vacation, vacation, or sick leave to cover the first 10 days so they can be paid. And then after the first 10 days are up, they're to be compensated at 2/3 of the regular rate during this entire 12 weeks. Again, there could be an exemption for small businesses. We don't have guidance yet from the Department of Labor. It should be forthcoming. I say job protected leave when I'm describing the family and medical leave portion of this statute. What that means is that generally the employee is entitled to the same level of job and at the same pay as they had before their leave began. So just like the normal rules with the Federal or Family and Medical Leave Act, those apply to this as well. Okay, so interplay with other leave. So if a full-time employee, they can take their 80 hours of emergency paid sick leave, which is basically the first 10 days of EFMLA, and then the employees can also elect to use other accrued paid leave during the first 10 days. Again, after the first 10 days, they can use this accrued paid leave that they're provided through their employers, so through you guys. And so basically the first 10 days, will generally consist of them exhausting their emergency paid sick leave through the federal statute, and then for the rest of their leave, they're entitled to use the vacation, PTO, and other accrued leave. No notice requirements like a poster or anything for this portion of the statute. But again, for this portion of the statute, if you are paying out employees, there is tax credit relief for employers. So again, if you can withstand the issues presented in the cash flow problem through the statute, just know that at some point we will be seeing the money come back our way. I'm going to close with one slide that hopefully will provide some relief to us, and it's currently being kicked around in the Senate right now. So it's pending, but be on the lookout for this bill, which will significantly help us because it provides small businesses, or would provide small businesses with loans of up to $10 million to help with payroll, and basically help us get through and comply with the FFCRA. Essentially, what the bill currently says, and if it's passed as it currently stands, it will allow these loans to be forgiven. However, it is basically trying to deter us from laying off our employees because there's some eligibility requirements that condition the loans on whether or not we are letting go of employees between March 1 and June 30th. So definitely something to pay attention to, and that can help us get through this difficult time. Before I turn over to Aaron, there were some questions submitted, and I'm going to start with the ones received first that were directed toward me. I'll also answer some questions at the end. So the first is from Jacob in Georgia. Should salaried staff be required to come into work in order to receive a percentage of their salary? So generally, this raises an issue of whether or not the employee we're talking about is a non-exempt hourly employee, or if the person is exempt, so if the person is a non-exempt employee, which typically is our hourly employees, if they're at home and they're not performing any work, then they're not to be paid. But I think Jacob's question really goes toward our exempt employees who receive salaries. And so Jacob, the answer is generally, if an exempt employee doesn't perform work in a work week, we are not obligated to pay them for that work week. However, where this creates challenges is many of our exempt salaried employees are working from home, and so they are performing work. So unless we can prove that they're not answering emails or text messages, etc., we should have to pay them. There isn't a requirement that they need to be in the four walls of our business to perform work. So you don't need to require them to come into work. They can be performing the work from home. Okay, next question here. Let's see. Victoria in Illinois wants to know, what are the biggest insights on how you feel this will change club operations and ancillary services? It's directed toward me and Aaron. So in my opinion, I think clubs are going to be offering, and this is already happening, virtual classes so that all of us who are stuck at home can continue to work out, and so that clubs can hopefully stay alive by selling virtual memberships, and so that's what I'm seeing right now. I'm sure Aaron will add some more insight to that question. And the last one that I can take that's directed toward me right now is Sarah from Wisconsin wants to know, can we have staff log their time and pay them when we reopen? So the staff is teaching virtually, calling members, etc., from home. So Sarah, yes, you should have those staff members log their time. and they should be paid during our next, whenever our next payroll date is. So the next date on which they're entitled to pay pursuant to our policies or to, your state law or federal law, they should receive that pay on time. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Aaron, and then we can pick up more questions here at the end.
Thanks, Adam. I appreciate all that good information. Also, I want to thank IHRSA for all the work they're doing and putting on webinars like these. I know it's extremely helpful for me and a lot of the other operators that I see out in the audience. I know you guys are working around the clock and just as stressed as every operator in the industry. So just want to take time out to acknowledge and thank you guys for all the hard work and the hours that you're putting in. So kind of picking back off where Adam left off, as this thing was coming out, and for us in DC, it was right about March 15th, March 16th, where we heard a lot of information that our mayor was thinking about closing down the city. We pull a lot of our customers from Northern Virginia and Maryland that commute into DC for work. And there was a lot of orders that were kind of coming down the pike there. So when we got together with our ownership and our senior team, it's like, okay, let's acknowledge that this is a very fluid situation. Things are going to change by the day and by the hour. So let's really try to determine our primary objectives that are not going to change regardless of the information that comes down. So as you can see in the slide that I have pulled up here, our number one mission was to keep paying our employees for the duration of the closure. Now, when we set that objective, we were expecting our closure to be 2 weeks. And obviously, that's not the case for really anybody in the country at this point. From what I'm hearing, most people are planning on a June or even a July opening. So we're going to have to more than likely adjust that primary objective, but at the same time, we're doing everything in our power to maintain it. And then number two for us, which is what I'll focus the most of my time on, is strategically and creatively generating revenue through new and existing profit centers. So the short of that is it's a really big challenge for all of us right now to bring in any form of new revenue whatsoever, but we've got to try and we've got to put an attempt out there. And with existing profit centers, it's really just a call on the generosity of our respective membership bases to see what financial position they're in, which albeit may be just as challenging, if not more challenging than ours, and how they might be able to support us. So starting with employee pay, in the highlighted sections here, I think these are good questions for everybody to ask themselves, all the operators out there, and you probably already have asked yourselves these questions. And then the blue font that follows is really how we answered those questions. And again, some of those things are adjusting based on the information that's coming out. So what do you have in cash reserves? I want to highlight that there's a big difference between what we want to do and what we're able to do. I think of a lot of us out there want to continue to paying our employees, at least some of them, to the extent that we have, but we may not and you may not have that opportunity. So again, it doesn't really matter what you want to do, is what are you able to do? So when we looked at our cash reserves, not much there, which I think is pretty standard for a lot of the independent operators in the industry. We knew that we could cover one additional pay period where we could pay employees their normal earnings. So for us, that's a 2-week pay period, 14 days. The salaried employees are simple. They're going to continue to get their salary. For membership consultants that earn a commission, we paid them their average commissions. For personal trainers, same thing, their average commissions. For group fitness instructors and spa staff, same thing, their average commissions. And then for our hourly employees, it was, okay, during our closure, what are the hours they would have worked and would have been scheduled? And we paid them based off of that. And we knew that after that pay period, it was really going to be dependent on a revenue situation and what we had and what we didn't have. So I'll cover that here in a bit. Next item, rent is a huge part of our expenses, like I'm sure it is for many of you. And this dynamic is even shifting a good little bit as well. So when we first looked at this, and I've since adjusted this, as you can see, we're saying, okay, let's get everybody paid for the month of April full rent. And the dynamic in DC may be similar or different to what the people on the call are experiencing, in that most of our landlords have many small retail clients. So we wanted to position ourselves as one of their larger clients, as somebody that was still paying full rent out the gate, knowing that a lot of their tenants and a lot of their clients weren't going to be able to do so. So we thought that would create some goodwill down the road. We quickly realized that if we did that, we might be in a position where we're not paying any rent or very little rent for the month of May. So we decided, okay, we're going to put 50% down as a good faith gesture in the month of April, and then we're going to proactively call our landlords and explain the situation. Every landlord was a little bit different. We even had one landlord that said, hey, don't pay us anything now. Nobody is paying us anything now. We'll worry about this once we get everybody reopened, and we'll spread what you didn't pay over the course of 3 months or 6 months or whatever it is after you're able to reopen. So obviously that's going to depend on the relationship you have with your landlord. I've heard great stories about great partnerships out there, and I've heard horror stories as well. So it just kind of depends on your situation, but I really encourage everybody to be open and honest with your landlords, because they're trying to budget their finances as well. And then with our vendors, we have a lot of industry vendors and IHRSA preferred vendors out there. And I know there's some vendors on the call, so I want to say thank you to you guys as well. There's a lot of you that have suspended payments that are owed while a lot of clubs have been closed. And I know you guys are worried about making your bottom line and paying your employees as well. So I know a lot of the industry vendors out there are doing everything they possibly can to support club operators through this time. I won't talk too much about government assistance and relief. I think Adam did an amazing job of covering that, but just some of the things we're looking into. Our mayor in DC put out a $25 million relief package for small businesses. There's a max of $25,000 that can go to any one company. So we're throwing our hat in the ring to try to get a piece of that pie as well. And then, as I'm sure many of you have seen in your jurisdictions, we're looking at extensions and things like that on paying sales taxes. So getting back into the final components of employee pay, we know that the longer this thing goes on, we're going to have to prioritize who we pay and who we don't pay. So we did that at the outset. We communicated it openly and transparently with all of our employees and let them know that, hey, if revenue looks a little bit better than we're thinking, if this closure is a little bit shorter than we're thinking, we might be able to do better than we're currently communicating. But here's what we know so far. So like many of you, our business operates primarily based on our salaried employees. Those are the employees that really rely on us to pay their rent and put food on the table. So we're going to prioritize them first, and then we're going to go to our full-time hourly employees. And from there on down, we're getting into commission employees, some ICs, some part-timers that are really just utilizing us for a complimentary gym membership, a few extra spending dollars in their pocket and things like that, not the mission critical folks. So getting into revenue sources, again, this is where we're focusing the majority of our time. So in our initial communication and our communications really over the last 10 days with our membership base, it's transparently explaining your unique situation to your members and asking them to do anything that they can do to support the operation. So I want to clarify that probably the most economical thing to do, and what our financial advisors advised us to do, is go ahead and lay off all your employees and sit on your cash reserves and wait this thing out and bring them back when you can reopen. And I think for a lot of folks in the industry, that's really the only option. So a lot of the things that Adam was outlining with furloughs and layoffs and things like that, I think that will probably be the most helpful part of this presentation. But for us, we fortunately had the opportunity to approach it a little bit differently. Our financial advisors say, hey, you're really putting yourselves out there. This could be more costly than just laying anybody off. But we had the opportunity to do it. We wanted to give it a shot. So I just wanted to give everybody that disclaimer on this. This might be the economically foolish approach, but if we can pull it off, I think it'll be a tremendous amount of goodwill with our employees, as well as the community as a whole. So really what we went after was giving our membership base 3 options. Option 1, if you can afford it, we'd really love you to continue paying your full membership dues, and we're going to provide as much value to your membership as humanly possible during this closure. Number 2, if you can't afford it, we totally get it. We're going to offer you the ability to freeze your membership at $25 per month. For context, we're about $120 per month membership. So you can freeze your membership while we're closed for $25 per month, and we're still going to give you access to our virtual content. And number 3, if you're in a financially challenging situation yourself, you can either cancel your membership, freeze your membership, no cost to you whatsoever. So you see the percentages there in parentheses right now as it sits, and I imagine these percentages are going to fluctuate. We have 83% plus of our membership base that is continuing to paying their full membership dues. So we're very humbled and grateful for our members that have done that for us. The longer this situation goes on, that number is going to drop and drop significantly as more and more people get laid off and things of that nature. So right now we can obviously do a lot with 83% of our membership dues, and we're being very transparent in that, hey, we're not paying a whole lot of vendors right now. We're not paying a whole lot of rent right now. All this money is going to as many employees as possible because that's really what our members care about, is keeping our employees employed as long as possible. With the freezes, that's been about 16% of our membership base so far. Again, I expect that number to increase significantly. And then thankfully, we have less than 1% of our membership base right now that is canceled or has frozen their membership without paying any cost. So again, I can't express enough how grateful we are for our membership base and supporting us in that way. Obviously, we could not ask them to do that if we laid off all of our employees and sat on our cash reserves. So I think it's, you got to choose one lane or another if you even have the option to do so. So now we get into, okay, we're going to keep charging you membership dues or a freeze fee. What are we going to give you in return? How are we going to give you an engaging membership experience while we're closed? So I put some links in there to the slide that hopefully everybody can check it out and maybe it'll be helpful. So we have virtual classes on demand. We opened up a Vimeo channel. We did a professional shoot with a videographer. So those are very high quality looking videos. So as we have the resources available, we're continuing to put that content out there. We're also live streaming classes on both Facebook and Zoom that people can either take in real time with us and engage, or they can go in later that day or later the week, and those classes are archived for them to take. So these are a great way to keep our members engaged, but we're also communicating that when our instructors and our trainers teach these classes, this is giving them an opportunity to work and giving us an opportunity to pay them for that work. So not only are you getting a great workout, but you're supporting a very worthy cause during a challenging time. So yes, we're asking you to pay your full membership dues and not get the full value, but we're not just sitting on your membership dollars. We're working hard, we're working around the clock, and we're trying to deliver as much value as is legally and safely possible. For folks that don't enjoy taking classes, kind of like doing their own thing, we want to be relevant with them as well. So we're creating a series of downloadable PDFs. Some are on nutrition, some are on body weight workouts that you can do at home or in your basement or in your garage, and really listening to our members on what information they need from us and putting that educational content out there for them to access. And then a lot of our personal training clients, our nutritional counseling clients, they still want to engage with their service provider. So we've set up Zoom, FaceTime, Skype, and a few other platforms to where they can do that on a remote basis with their personal trainer. So the volume is definitely much lower than what we typically see when we're open, but we're doing something and we have a certain level of engagement, and every little bit helps, both in terms of bringing in revenue and giving our service providers an opportunity to work where they otherwise might not have one. So the latest thing that we're doing, and I apologize it's not on this slide, but I'm certainly happy to distribute it to IHRSA to distribute to the membership base, is we've created a virtual membership for people that are not yet members. So everything that I've gone over up to this point, our membership base is going to have access to. but what about all those prospects that you have in your database that were interested in membership that are most likely on hold right now until you reopen? What about continuous lead generation? And what about doing something that you might not otherwise have the time and resources to do while you're open? So that's been the virtual membership for us. We want to tee up some memberships for people that are interested in membership, that are already in our prospect database, to take advantage of the same content that members are taking advantage of to make the buying decision today to get engaged, so we have them in place when we're able to reopen our doors, as opposed to waiting to reopen our doors and trying to re-engage prospective members, so to speak. And then we're also using it to play on the people who have decided to support us and have expressed interest in continuing to support our employees, and say, hey, you're going to get all this valuable content as included with your membership, but the best way that you can support us is to take all this content, promote it to your family members and your friends around the world, and ask them to sign up for a virtual membership. So for non-members, we're charging $49 per month. Again, for context, our normal price point is $120. So for $49, you get access to all this virtual content. So we're hopeful that this initiative actually launches later today, that we can get some new revenue dollars coming in so we can continue to support our employees during a longer than expected closure. Final slide that I have here for everybody, and then I'm going to go through some of these questions, is language is everything. So this is some of the language that has resonated really well with our membership base. Now it's customized to our business, our culture, the way we communicate, and what we're doing during this period. So I want to caution everybody, this isn't a copy and paste type thing, but language is important. So figuring out what are the talking points that are really going to work with your members, and arming your entire staff to get on message with the same message to really create more of a movement with it. Because that's the big thing that our members are asking for us, is like, hey, we get it, we know what you're going through, just stay in constant contact with us. We know things are changing every day, just communicate everything openly and transparently. So our message has obviously been much longer than this and many more communications, but this seems to be the consistent phraseology that has really resonated well for us. So I hope that was helpful. So we'll go through a few questions here. I see. All right, so there's one internationally. Jolene, I hope I pronounced that right, from Singapore. What are some of the best ways to engage communities and members online? Any club innovations and digital practices to suggest? So in addition to the things that I covered, I know there's also a lot of third-party resources out there. I know Les Mills, for example, is offering, I think it's 95 classes on either a 2-week trial or a 30-day trial that you could just take and post on your website. So if you don't have the ability or the technology to mobilize your instructors to produce your own content, or maybe you don't offer classes at all, I know there's a lot of third-party vendors out there that are willing to help with that as well. Scrolling up, I see a lot of these questions are for Adam. So I see a question from Dwayne here. It says, what's the size of your membership base and how many employees do you have? So our membership base right now is about 14,600 members, and we have just under 600 employees. So we are out of the 1 through 500 range that Adam discussed. So another question here, what's the name of this vendor who allows 95 classes available to share with members? That's Les Mills. You should be able to find that on the homepage of their website. If not, I'm sure we could work with IHRSA to get that information out to you guys. So really good question here from Kristen. Asked, curious if you've started to think about your reopening plan. If so, what does it include? I think that's a really important thing for us not to get bogged down in the present and start planning for the future. The way we're thinking about it is we're planning like we're opening our clubs for the first time as a brand new business with limited awareness in our community, knowing that we're really going to have to re-engage our community and the members that we have available. So we're looking at financing options right now, treating this as a, hey, we need to prepare for several months of operating losses because our membership base is going to be significantly down the longer this lasts. We need to get out there, do a lot of community events, get awareness out there. We don't have the illusion and are not pretending because we had brand awareness before we closed that we're going to have that same level of brand awareness once we reopen our doors. So I think we have to think of it in a very entrepreneurial sense. In a very, I'm just starting up my mom and pop small business all over again, and really approaching it that way and encouraging the team to approach it that way. I know one of the big things for us to build our presence in the community was a lot of outside engaging outdoor events, really shaking hands in the community, doing events at employers, doing events in residential buildings, and really just getting our name out there as opposed to relying solely on digital marketing to get our message across. So I would encourage everybody to start thinking about ways that you can be extremely active in the community, because what may very well happen in all of our markets is there are limitations to how you can open and how many people you can have in the building, but you may be able to do more outdoors in addition to that, especially as the weather is starting to improve and get nicer in most parts of the country. I think it's going to be and I know we're getting a little close to my time, so I'll look at one more question before I turn it back over to Christine and her team. So here's a good question from Sam. With regards to revenue generation, has anyone looked at or is anyone currently renting equipment to their members in exchange for continuing to pay full dues or an additional fee? So I know there's really two schools of thought on this. And both involve insurance implications and legal and things like that. So I have friends across the industry that are doing that exact thing, either just through goodwill or as a revenue source, providing equipment to members so they can get more value out of the virtual content that they're putting online. We have chosen not to do that for two very specific reasons, both of which are legal related. So one, we're not letting any equipment out of our possession simply due to coronavirus concerns, and making sure, it'd be so easy to lend somebody a pair of dumbbells, they bring them back, they're asymptomatic for coronavirus, and the person receiving the equipment back in the inventory doesn't do the job they've been coached and trained to do in sanitizing the equipment, and then someone else gets exposed to it. So we're probably over cautionary there, but that's the approach we've taken. And then from an insurance standpoint, if someone were to get injured using your equipment, accessing your virtual content, there could potentially be an issue there. So as an alternative, because we do have some revenue coming in right now, most people are just asking for a set of dumbbells, and most of the people that are asking, the set they're asking for is under 30 pounds. That's a very low cost for us. We've created a pool with our employees where everybody's chipped in a little bit as a thank you to our members for continuing to pay our salaries. And we're taking those funds and we're working with places like Power Systems and Perform Better and Spry and just buying equipment for our members to ship to their house so they can use it during our closure. And we've gotten an incredible amount of goodwill in that approach as well. Because it's really it's a chain of custody issue for us, not an issue of wanting our members to have equipment. So I think that's a really good question, and I know a lot of operators out there are, figuring that out, so to speak. So, Christine, I'll take it back over to you, but thank you.
Great. Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, Adam. Angeli, if you'd like to take a couple more questions, we still have some time here.
Okay. Let's see, let's look through here. So Cheryl asked, if your club is closed and only a few employees are working to care for the building, Is the paid sick leave paid to furloughed employees? There is no sick leave requirements in Arkansas.
Okay, this is Adam, and I'll address that question. So, if I'm understanding you correctly, I think the question has to do with those who are off work, and whether or not we have to pay them under the FFCRA. So we're not paying them for work performed because they're not able to work remotely. But beginning on April 1, the FFCRA is effective, and one of the qualifying reasons to receive those 10 days of federal paid sick leave is the employer can't work from home and is subject to a federal, state, or local quarantine or isolation order related to COVID-19. So as of April 1, a lot of America who's stuck at home, not able to work, is going to be able to get the federal sick leave. And so, yes, we would have to pay that starting April 1. I know there's other questions on the Q&A about what if we can't afford to do that. I have a lot of clients in that situation, and unfortunately have had to lay off massive amounts, permanently lay off massive amounts of their workforce to avoid being subject to the law.
It looks like we lost Anjali. I'll continue with some of these questions that are here. This is Christine from IHRSA. So we did get a lot of different questions. I want to go back to some of the questions that were submitted when we took registrations for the session. And one of them was actually for both Aaron and Adam. Here we go. So Aaron, Adam's already answered this question, but Victoria from Illinois wanted to know, what are your biggest insights on how you feel this will change club operations and ancillary services?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I think it's going to be a rebuilding phase. One of our biggest non-dues revenue categories is one-on-one personal training. It's about 30% of our total revenue. So we're expecting to probably lose about half of that. So how will we lose that? I think one is an engagement standpoint. You know, people are going to be out of the habit of coming to the gym, out of the habit of meeting with their personal trainer. Some people are going to figure out that they really like virtual fitness and the flexibility that it adds to their schedule, and are probably going to stick with that a little bit longer. And the reality of the situation is almost all of us are going to be negatively financially impacted by this situation, and those non-dues revenue categories are really going to be at risk. So even if somebody wants to train or wants to go to the spa and wants to go to a restaurant, they might be, on a tight budget and pinching pennies and not being able to do that. So we're planning to see, at least a 50% drop in some of those non-dues categories. So, depending on how you structure, how you pay personal trainers and things like that, you could be looking at some, staff reductions and things of that nature. So we're trying to turn back the clock a little bit because for us, everything is based on the number of members that we have. So if I look at it, we say, okay, we're going to lose, we have about 1,000 members. We're going to lose 2,000 members during this process. I've got to turn back the clock on my financials and say, okay, when I had 12,000 members, how was I operating, and how were my non-dues revenue categories? And I've got to go back to that, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, whatever it may be, and I've got to operate in that fashion in everything I do. Revenue expectations, payroll spend, marketing spend, things like that. And then our plan is to slowly work out of that. I have been recessed back to 2016 or whatever it is. So my first goal is to get back up to my 2017 numbers, and then my 2018 numbers, and so on and so forth. So very much a revenue growth company, as I think a lot of multi-club operators are out there. If you're sort of a single location, larger facility where, you look at the past 10 years and your revenue is fairly flat, other than adjusted cost due to inflation and things like that, you're probably going to come out of this thing a little bit better than those of us in growth models.
Thanks, Aaron, for those insights. Adam, the next question is for you. This came in from Jay. Is there any relief for 1099 or contracted staff?
Great question, Jay. The answer is no. At least for purposes of the FFCRA, you have to be an employee. If you're classified as an independent contractor, you're not going to be entitled to the benefits of this law. Now, I will say independent contractor laws around the country, it's a really hot topic right now. And so it raises another legal question, conversation for another day, is are we properly classifying our independent contractors as 1099s or should they be employees? So you can already see plaintiffs' attorneys trying to make arguments that this person should have been subject to the FFCRA and wasn't because you, the employer, misclassified them. So it's a great question, but if assuming we classified them correctly as a 1099, unfortunately for those folks, they don't reap the benefits of the new federal sick leave law.
Thanks, Adam. Aaron, one more for you here. This came in from Catherine, and there are a lot of questions related to this topic, so I'll let you give some advice here. But she asks, if you are paying your staff, are you asking them to come in and work? And if so, how are you distancing yourself, and what are they doing to keep themselves busy?
Yeah, really two parts to that answer. For the bulk of our employees, they're working from home. So practicing social distancing to every extent possible, and very much transitioning from a brick and mortar business to a virtual company or even a media company. So for the 90% of our employees, they're not coming to physical facilities. They're all online, remoted in, working from home. Now, the matter is we still got to maintain our facilities. So obviously things like sanitization, disinfecting, deep cleanings. You're hearing a lot of these trigger words going around right now. So, we are leveraging some facilities staff and some housekeeping staff to do that. And we even have a brand new club that's under construction right now that is technically supposed to open on May 1st. Now, I don't think that's going to happen for obvious reasons, but with our general contractor in that regard, he's maintaining, the CDC guidelines, at least 6 feet of separation. So to give you a visualization of what that looks like, we're laying tile right now. And we typically lay tile in 2-man teams where one person's cutting and the other person's doing the actual installing. So we obviously can't do that anymore. So we have the same 2 tile professionals on site. They're each in completely different areas doing start to finish tile installation. It's not as efficient, but we're working with what we have. So again, with our housekeepers, they are coming to the clubs. We're having them, much more distance, on separate floors if possible. Somebody might be deep cleaning the free weights while somebody else is in the cardio area. And most of our building systems we can maintain remotely. So that's great. But we do have to go in at least weekly just to make sure, everything's what it needs to be. But a lot of times that's 1 or 2 people at a time that can be doing that. So I would encourage everybody to stay out of your clubs as much as possible and only have people going in there that are performing a very specific facility maintenance task.
Great. Thanks, Aaron. Adam, we've got one more here for you, and it's a long one. This is from Sherry. It's 2 different parts. Her first question, does the employee have to submit a written request to be paid sick leave? And her second part, they're actually a California club. They have 400 attendees. They've been mandated to close their clubs. They closed on March 17th, and they're paying until the end of the next pay period, which will be the 31st. If they're not working, if their employees are not working, can they still request sick pay on top of being paid?
Okay, great question. So let's start with the second one first. If I'm understanding this correctly, there's club is closed. There's employees who are furloughed, so we haven't laid them off permanently. Right now, are we required to pay them California paid sick leave while they are furloughed? And the answer to that is no. You're not required to pay them sick leave while they're furloughed. Again, April 1, there's different banks or categories of sick leave. On April 1, those employees will be entitled to sick leave, but it's going to be the federal sick leave pay that we just talked about relating to the FFCRA. I hope that answers the question. And Christine, if you wouldn't mind, could you read back the first question for me?
Surely. So it's two different parts. The first question was, does the employee have to submit a written request to be paid sick leave?
Under the FFCRA, I'm assuming is the question. So there's no, basically, same rule applies as with the FMLA for purposes of getting that job protected leave. So as soon as reasonably practicable is the standard for employees. So as soon as reasonably practicable, they are to give us notice that they need this time off for the FMLA portion of the statute. And then for the notice requirements, and this will be in your slides, for the emergency paid sick leave portion, after the first workday or portion thereof, an employee receives paid sick leave, the employer may require the employee to follow reasonable notice procedures in order to continue receiving such paid sick leave. And I'm reading that out of the statute itself.
Okay. Thanks, Adam. I'm going to pass it over to Anjali now. She'll give some final closing remarks.
Thanks, Christine. I think that is all the time we have for today. But before you shut down, please take a moment to fill out the survey that you should see on your screen momentarily. We do appreciate any feedback that you can provide to help us improve future webinars. Thank you all for joining us today and for your interesting questions. As always, thanks also to our speakers for sharing their expertise. We hope you all have a great afternoon.